Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Call to Adventure podcast with me, George B. I hope you're all good, listeners and watchers. I say watchers because it's a little reminder. You can now view the video version of the podcast over at our YouTube channel, imaginatively called Call to Adventure, CALLTO Adventure. So check it out if you want to see our beautiful faces blabbering away. And we've also got some vlogs coming up soon as well of Call to Adventure, us scoping out some trips for you guys. So you can take a look. There's a couple coming up soon, one of Scotland winter mountaineering. And we're finally going to get the vlogs of my girlfriend and I's off-road cycle trip from Alaska down to Panama. I know they've been promised for a while, but they're coming in early-ish 2022. So if you want to see us stumbling upon the cartel in Mexico, exploring hallucinogens in the jungle with a shaman in Central America, and nearly getting eaten by a few too many grizzlies in North America, then head over and take a look. But now on to today's episode. So we're chatting with Ness Knight. Ness is an adventurer, conservationist, author, public speaker, and regenerative farmer. She's completed challenges and expeditions all around the world, paddleboarding 1,000 miles, cycling solo across America, completing the world first source to sea descent of the Essequibo River in Guyana, and traversing the Namib Desert solo. She was also the first woman to swim the River Thames from source to London, and her BBC adventure programmes are broadcast in over 20 countries. More recently, though, Ness has turned her attention to homesteading, sustainable living, and regenerative agriculture, putting her right at the intersection of adventure and sustainability, making her the perfect guest for the show. So, Ness, thanks for coming on. How's it all going?
Hi. Let's start that one again. Hi, evening. No, it's going brilliantly. I'm absolutely shattered from very little sleep with the little one, but other than that, I'm grand.
Well, we doubly appreciate you coming on when you got a lot going on with a new one. But we'll dig into that. Before we do, just to ease into it, we always kick off with some quickfire questions that listeners send in. And this one, just backed by popular demand, that people really like. It's a bit weird at the beginning of Adventure Podcast, but favourite cheese, Ness?
Brie, of course. Always soft cheese. Can't bear the sight or the taste or the texture of a hard cheese.
That was probably the quickest answer that we've ever had. You nailed it. You were ready. You were primed. Okay.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. By the way, I had no idea that the question was going to come. I didn't know it was a thing on the podcast. So
okay, Brie. I love Brie. Brie is awesome. TK or brown sauce?
What is TK?
Tomato ketchup.
Oh, right.
Sorry, very American.
Call that. Oh, it's got to be ketchup.
Do you have a mix?
Depends what it is. If it is a bap with bacon and egg, then absolutely you cannot do it any other way. But it doesn't go with it. You can't mix them with everything. You're playing with fire that way.
Right, last one that we haven't had before. I don't know who sent this one in, but favorite dinosaur?
Oh, I'm gonna have to say a velociraptor. Mostly because my little girl at the moment sounds like a velociraptor when she's sleeping. The kind of grunts and squeaks and noises that come out of her is phenomenal.
Little dinosaur crawling around. Okay, velociraptor. Yeah, it's a goodie. So it's a cool name in itself, isn't it? The velociraptor. It is. Yeah.
Probably pretty much why I chose it. Blaming it on the little girl, but...
Okay, awesome. Quick fire done. So I was thinking today about because I normally kick off with like the connection, how I found out about the guest, and I'd seen you speak or your name at quite a few outdoor events on the circuit, and then I somehow became friends with Pip Stewart, and she came on the podcast a while ago. And then I saw you guys.
Most beautiful souls on the planet.
She's awesome, isn't she? She's just a bundle of sunshine. Yeah, just a really good egg, a good positive force to have around. So yeah, Pip's great. And then I saw you guys doing your, how do you say it? Is it Essequibo or Essequibo in Guyana?
Neither.
Oh.
In Guyana, oh gosh, we call it Essequibo.
Essequibo, yeah.
but I think in Guyana it might have been Essequibo. I can't remember. Too long ago. My brain's fried with baby stuff. So, but we call it the Essequibo.
Essequibo. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
So that's really where I kind of started following your story a little bit, but that looked like a pretty epic adventure. How did that all come about?
So that was the glorious vision of Laura Bingham. She's one of my best mates on the planet. Absolutely phenomenal girl. She's the wife of Ed Stafford, and so when she heard of him heading out to Guyana in his early days and all the tales that he was telling her of, looking up into the trees and just, the amount of diversity that was there, you would see all of these different species of monkey, these birds, the life there just burst from the canopy. And he really, I think, did want to go back at some point, and she was just in there way before him. She was just like, hang on a second, this is a beautiful place, I need an expedition on my hands, I'm taking this one, honey. And so, yeah, she just approached me one day, and in typical Laura fashion, she was like, hey, I got a bit of a crazy idea, do you want to come on board? And yeah, us two are just a tag team. And the second she mentioned, one of the most untouched corners of the planet, going out there to pristine virgin rainforest and going and doing a world first, something that's never been done. What really hooked me, though, I think, was when she said that it was the third largest river in South America, and the source of it had never been found before, never been documented. And that just blew my mind. It's the third largest river in South America. So that was just a no-brainer, an absolute no-brainer. And the further we dug down into our research into Guyana and Essequibo, the more we realized that the tribe that we were going to invite with us to be our guides, as it were, in the jungle, because we were like jungle toddlers. I mean, we thought we were the shizzle manizzle in the whole world of adventure, but actually you go out there and you realize that these guys that live with the jungle as their backyard, you can't touch them. You can't even come close. A lifelong of training, and you'll never come close to them.
Yeah.
But phenomenal people in this incredible idyllic corner of the planet that just was so rare for somewhere to be so untouched. And they were pretty marginalized within their own country, the Wai Wai community, and they were responsible for the conservation management of this enormous area in the southwest of Guyana, and they had no support from the government in terms of technology and any funding towards it. And yeah, people, I suppose, in their country looked down on them as, one of these ancient tribes, but that they were almost uneducated and primitive and just not worth a second glance, really. And we now know, having gone and spent time there, and we know this all around the world, that actually these indigenous communities are some of the wisest, with the most incredible knowledge and understanding of how our planet should work and does work, that we don't get. Anyway, they were marginalized, and we thought that we could have this fantastic international collaboration with them and us. We were very, very much against going there as these chest-beating, flag-planting, folk who just want to come and say, hey, we've once again, a group of white people have come in and just said, yeah, we've achieved, we've explored, we've conquered. And it was not about that at all. So that collaboration and that unity and that sort of teamwork between our groups was really important to us, including, our vision was to leave there, having left all the technology that we could provide them with to continue the work that they needed to do on the ground. So they came with the ability to allow us to survive, to push through the kind of terrain and undergrowth that, we would never have been able to do it on our own. It was unreal. And we provided the funding and the technology to be able to document this and to, have the means to pay them to take us through and give them that work and give them that credibility in the the eyes of Guyanans.
Yeah. What do you think they took from you guys being out there then? You kind of mentioned a bit of the recognition. What else do you think they took from? Did they see it as an adventure like you guys, or do you think they really saw it as like paid work? Or what do you think how was their experience of it?
From everything that they said to us along the way, I think it changed. I think that initially it was an incredible opportunity for them to have, yes, paid work, because that can be really challenging when you're in a village in the very south of a country where there's no access roads in or out. All they have is an airstrip, and I think it was probably about 2 or 3 times a year that an aeroplane will come in there, a small light aircraft. That's really disconnected. And so to be able to be in the village and get work off, your doorstep is phenomenal for them. And it's really, really important. I think that they really were keen on the adventure side of it. I think it spoke to them deeply that it was an opportunity to have the funding, to have all the tools and the equipment to find the source of their own river, the river that had sustained them for, many, many decades and 100 years, 200 years. And so for them, it was far more meaningful than it ever could be for us. And I think that unfolded as we got further down the journey. But what really came to the forefront, I think, was about halfway through, we started seeing this immense pride swell up from them. And that was because we started to get some press off the back of our journey. And the people of Guyana started to talk about it. We started to get on the news, and it was a known expedition about halfway through. And suddenly they were seen in a different light by their own people of their own country. And I think that was hugely important by the end of it, but I don't think they foresaw that. But no, they were so up for the adventure. And I think when they first saw 3 women white women from Britain stepping off of that plane, looking utterly excited but bewildered at what lay in front of us, I think that they thought, God blimey, what have we got ourselves into? These girls are going to know absolutely bugger all about, what's coming their way. And initially, it's a very traditional society, a very traditional community where the women have their roles and men have their roles, and it works beautifully for them. And they would never have it any other way. But that did mean that us 3 explorers and adventurers going in there wanting to learn how to do jungle survival 101 from the most brilliant experts that you could ever imagine having in front of you in the world. I think it was a bit of a joke for them, because they were like, no, this is not your role. This is not. And it was a bit of a clashing point for the first week or 2. And it took us, and that wasn't out of spite from them. It was just that they weren't used to that kind of a role play. And yeah, we just persisted. And every single opportunity that we could, we would say to them, please teach me how to do this. And we'd get into a camp and they'd say, no, you need to step back. It's dangerous in here. We need to clear the area. And we'd be like, no, but we want to come and help. They said, no, you can sharpen your machetes over there and just watch for now. And maybe you can get some firewood. And gradually we just pushed our way in. And at the same time, they gradually pulled us in. And the respect that they had for the fact that we were just never giving up, that we were so intent on learning, that we were so willing to be their students. And by the end of it, I remember one of them turning around to me and they said, well, Ness, you're officially now one of our very first ever Wai Wai female warrior. And that meant the world, So they saw something that I think they hadn't seen before, with these stubborn as 3 girls coming from overseas. And I think we were hugely humbled by them, and I think that they grew an immense respect and a great friendship with us. And so it was this beautiful relationship as we progressed through the journey.
I guess from what you've mentioned so far, there was a point to the fact that it was 3 women doing an epic adventure. Am I right in picking up on that? Was it kind of a point of the trip to do it as 3 women? And what are your thoughts on the kind of general state of the adventure industry on the back of that?
Yeah, definitely Laura came to the table. I mean, she was the expedition leader. It was her vision. It was her expedition that she pulled Pip and I into. And so her vision for that was, yes, to have 3 women going out there, doing something that had never been done before, something phenomenal. And one of the most incredible corners of the planet. And it was dangerous. We were in a place where for at least the first half of the expedition, there was no hope of extraction because we couldn't get a helicopter with a winch in Guyana or in either of the neighboring countries to pull that in to be that extraction for us. And they said to us, well, if you want us to come and get you if something goes wrong, you need to cut down an area of the rainforest the size of a football pitch. And we're like, oh, hang on a sec, we're in primary virgin rainforest here. We've got trees the size of houses. That's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So
get your penknife out.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. There's a whole lot of machete practice there if you really want. But yeah, it was one of those journeys where I think Laura really wanted to showcase to the world that girls, women are just as powerful as men, and we might come to the table with a very different dynamic, but our strengths are our own strengths that we have, and we can achieve just as much through that. Me personally, I love that. I think it's fantastic, and I think that it has been certainly. There's no getting around the fact that it's been a male-dominated space in the public eye, and I say that last in the public eye because women have been doing expeditions left, right, and centre since forever. That's never changed, and there have been just as many women out there doing this kind of stuff. The difference is they never got the limelight. So that's changing now. That's beginning. We're on the crest of a wave, I think, of things really beginning to shift. And that's very, very, very much needed. And I think it's very much wanted. And that's important to know. And I think social media has really changed that and created these new opportunities for women. And I think that when I go in my everyday job as a broadcaster, as a filmmaker, as a presenter, I actually see more opportunities opening for me than for my male counterparts. And that's because women are beginning to get in demand now. And I think that is a fantastic thing. For me, in terms of expeditions and journeys, I won't lie, I actually prefer to have a mixed group. I think the journey that I did with Pip and Laura was phenomenal. But the fact was we weren't just 3 women. We were 3 women with 5 Wai Wai men.
Mm.
So that was a fantastic dynamic, and we saw how powerfully that can work, and the great friendships that could come out of that, and the great achievements that could come out of that. And to me, that was an eye opener, and it's something that I've always believed is I'm not really extremist. That I don't believe that if we say, oh well, we must do woman only this and woman only that. Well, that's just doing exactly what you said that the blokes did. I don't see that as working long term. And for me, if I choose an expedition or grow my business, or I have some project on the go, I will choose a person that is most qualified for the position that I want to fill. And I will choose the right people to come on an expedition that have the right dynamic and the right skill sets. And that's it. At the end of the day, I don't care what your background is, where you come from, what skin color you are, whether you're male, female, or however you define yourself. Don't care. Not bothered. But I do believe that, yes, we need to write an imbalance. But yeah, it's difficult how exactly to go about that. And I'm definitely not on the extremist that everything's going to be just, only woman things. So it doesn't work for me.
Mm. Yeah, I think I'm in exactly the same camp. The fact that it's obvious that there is an issue, right? And something needs to be done to address it. The fact that women haven't been given equal opportunities, or people of color. And then I think there's lots of people wanting to do the right thing. And it can feel like women only, whatever, adventures or whatever it is that you're working in can seem like a good solution, and was something that I talked about for a while. And I talked about it with another partner who I work with, and he was just kind of saying, well, you always talk about like the ideal world that we want to get to is where your sex, your gender, your race is not interesting. It's as important as eye color. So nobody is given privilege
utterly inconsequential.
Yeah. So then, is it really the right thing to do to say it? But then I kind of see how some women do feel uncomfortable with doing some things. Like there's a ladies climbing night near the climbing gym where I go now, and it's really popular, and I kind of do get it. So I see
Mm.
I see both sides of it, but I think we're kind of united in like the where we want to go, which is just where there's kind of equal opportunity for all, right? So it's a interesting and dynamic and evolving space.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And I think it's fantastic where you get a more comfortable space where it is women's only groups to go and do climbing as an introduction, because a lot of things can seem very daunting, and especially when we've got this enormous history of something appearing to be male dominated, because that's what's got the limelight, and so it intimidates people. So there is absolutely a space for things like that. I do fully agree with you.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like an awesome trip. I think Pip certainly, well, you might say, drew the short straw with her tropical disease that was pretty serious, wasn't it?
Bless
For
her.
some time
Yeah, just a
afterwards,
bit.
it
Flesh
was,
eating parasite. I mean,
fa-
that's one hell of a souvenir to take home with you.
yeah, yeah. And it's kind of, you always think that stuff's never going to happen, really, or never going to happen to somebody that you know. And I don't know Pip that well, but it was just very strange to see all of this stuff going on with her and how rare it was. And she was going to the Centre for Tropical Disease or whatever it's called in London, and yeah, it's kind of amazing that that stuff is out there. And I guess it was pretty unlucky. Did you have any other close scrapes, or did you? I mean, you didn't have to cut any football fields down, I don't think, but was it did it generally go down pretty much without a hitch, other than Pip?
Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. We didn't go down without a hitch. I think we had luck on our side. There were many, many close shaves. I mean, Pip, at one point we were on the trek to, we'd gone as far as we could upriver before the water got too shallow, that we couldn't get our dugout canoes any further. And so we made a base camp. And from there we started walking to try and find the source of the river. And I believe it was close to the source where we were far enough into the walk that complacency had started kicking in for all of us. Where not too much has happened so far. Oh, this dangerous environment that, you should have your wits about you, where you start kind of thinking, well, nothing's happened so far. And yeah, you relax into it and everything's wonderful and hunky dory. And one of those days where we're absolutely exhausted, pushing out absolute limits, very, very dehydrated, and trying to get to a new camp and find a new camp spot for the night. And I remember Pip, I think she was in front of me in the line that we were following each other, and she was going over a huge, huge, huge fallen log on the ground. And as she was scrambling up, Laura just shrieked out, "Snake, snake!" And I've never seen anyone move. She was like lightning. She was, I mean, and Pip, bless her soul, I'm like, I love her to absolute bits, but she's got two left feet. And yeah, she's a bit like me in that respect. But I've never seen her shift so precisely and so fast in my life. And I don't think I ever will again. But it turns out that was a baby pit viper. And yeah, the guys explained to us that the babies are the most dangerous things because they haven't yet learnt to control how much venom they inject. Now, if that had got her, and bear in mind this was about an inch from her butt cheek, literally, and ready to strike, she was lucky. That's all. She was just lucky that this thing didn't want, it was playing safe with her that day. Had it got her, that would have been tickets. End of Pip. You wouldn't be having any conversations about leishmaniasis or the Tropical Disease Centre in London. Nothing. Because yeah, there is no extraction at that point. And so that was our first wake up call on the expedition. I think it was 2 to 3 weeks into it, and all of a sudden we came to this realization that nothing will kill you faster than complacency in an environment like this. And it is beautiful, but it is hostile. It is this weird contradiction where you look up and within one space you've got life and death staring you in the face. Anything can go wrong in a jungle, and it's usually the small things. It's usually the things that get under your skin and burrow, and infection setting in, and the stuff that you don't think will get you. You always think, oh, it's going to be a jaguar. No, definitely not. But a case in point was us looking up, and on one of the days that we were getting trained up about how to survive in the jungle from these warriors, is they said, well, look at those two vines there. And I said, well, they look like they're the same vine. And he said, yes, they look identical. I said, well, I thought they were literally the same vine. He says, no. And we looked up and he said, you cut one, and what drips out of one vine is poison. So if you have a couple of drops of this, you will go into a hallucinogenic state. More than that will do more damage, apparently. And that's death for you, staring in the face there. And they use it actually for fishing. So they put some of this into the water and the fish die. And that's and next to it was another vine identical to it, and cut that open. And he said, drink from this. We were pretty bloody skeptical at that point once he just explained what the other one is. Are you sure? Are you very sure? Are you absolutely certain that you've got this right way around? And it's, that's the jungle for you, is that you've really got to know inside out. It's going to be your pantry. It's all the building materials you need. It's your medicine cabinet. At the same time, if you're complacent and if you're lazy with the way that you move through it and that you interact with it, that's your life at stake.
Yeah, it's a really special and unique place, the jungle, isn't it? Like, I love mountains and deserts, but there's something that is so special about the jungle. It's so different from everywhere else, and like you say, you have to keep a higher level of awareness than I think almost anywhere else, because there's so much going on. Like, just the level of sounds and noises and things moving around and plants and animals, and it's almost like a sensory overload, but in a natural way. So it's not like going on the streets of Delhi where you're like, just turn this off, I need to go back inside for a minute. It's more like kind of brings you in Jumanji style, and it's just kind of all engrossing.
Well, actually, this was one of the things that really struck me about halfway through the expedition, is as they were training us up, and they managed to say that we'd graduated from toddlers to kind of teenagers in our jungle learning curve. And I just realized, just watching them day in and day out, that in our ordinary lives, in our Western world that we go about, we have so much technology that's literally screaming at us, saying, hey, pay attention to me. Your phone rings, your notification for a message, your alarm goes off, someone calling you. There's constantly something telling you what to do, a car horn beeping to warn you about something. And you almost become lazy with the use of your senses. And what I realized from these guys is how we used to be and how we should be, which is an awareness. And I had this also with the San Bushmen in Namibia, exactly the same thing, is the ability to use all of your senses at the same time. And it sounds daft. We keep thinking, well, of course I am. I'm looking at you. I'm listening to you. I'm touching whatever's in front of me. No. That's nothing compared to what these guys do. They have this ability to be aware of absolutely everything around them, from what's right in front of them to something that is 3 kilometers away. They see things that we would never be able to see, because they say to us, okay, well, you're on the river, we're drifting downstream. What do you see around you? What are you paying attention to? What's going on? What do you hear? What's happening? And I'd tune in. I'd be like, well, I can hear some macaws over there, and I think I'm going to follow that, and there's that sound over there, and there seems to be like this buzzing in the tree. I wonder if that's some kind of crickets or locust, or what's happening there. And for a few minutes, I'd go through one by one these different things. They have the ability to do all of that at the same time and be aware of it. So when you go sightseeing with these guys, it's unreal. It's a bombardment of life around you, and they're just pointing, and they've seen everything coming their way. They're aware of where jaguar are, not just because they have seen a footprint on the ground, but they've heard the faintest sound while seeing a footprint in this direction, while smelling the faintest of scents, and having a sixth sense, a kind of gut instinct about things. And we've just lost that ability. We've become so lazy with how we're aware of things. And so I went into the jungle, and that almost cost us our survival in a way. We would have maybe just survived, but not thrived in that environment until we were able to unwind the damage that we'd done in a Western world and that laziness, and dial in and tune in to what these guys have, which is just this uncanny ability to have full 360 awareness.
Yeah, that's a great description, and something that I've kind of thought about. I kind of think of it as it's almost like a sixth sense, but it's just that all of their other senses are operating really highly at the same time, and that kind of makes as if they had a sixth sense, right? It's not that they're magical or that they can do anything
Completely.
else,
Yeah.
but they're just everything is
Mm,
firing on all cylinders, and hyper awareness and like a
mm,
lifetime of training. It's almost like it's kind of like constant mindfulness training, isn't it? Because we might
mm.
do, like 20 minutes mindfulness training in the morning, but like you say, our whole world is set up for distraction, whereas theirs is kind of set up
Yeah.
for survival. And so they're optimizing for
Mm.
that, and that's kind of like what our
Discovery.
senses.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I would love to be able to experience. Imagine if you could go on like a VR type walk as one of them and actually see what it was like, and it would be such a different experience, wouldn't it? I remember even just doing an outdoor course here when.
Utterly. Completely.
Yeah, I remember doing just an outdoor course for a week in the Lake District when I was younger here, and learning the names of different trees helps you really differentiate as you're walking through the forest, and you start to see things and pick them out a lot
Mm,
more. And that was from like a week of paying attention. So you imagine what it's like after 30 years of
mm.
just completely being absorbed in your habitat, and it must be such a rich experience.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's where the richness of those people that say I want to learn, I want to go on some courses, I want to really understand how to go on expeditions and have that skill set, the navigation, the fire making, everything, the learning which trees and shrubs and plants mean what to you, because when you move through an environment, you see things, literally everything does pop into 3D, and suddenly it's not just going for a walk in the woods. Suddenly you're looking around you and saying, I can make something out of that. I can use that as rope. That's for fire. That is food. That's medicine.
Mm.
And all of a sudden you tap into that ancient part of you that is so capable and so knowledgeable. And nothing's gone away from our ability to do that, except a pass down of knowledge and immersion. I think that curiosity about the world and about discovery is lost a little bit on us, and I think that we do ourselves wonders to tap back into that.
Mm. How did you learn all of your outdoor skills and survival stuff?
Oh gosh, initially by accident and failure and mistakes. I got into my, as it were, career of adventure and exploration. I was accidental, really. I mean, I just quit my job in London, in the city. And at the time, I was teaching entrepreneurship, teaching e-commerce, and I was doing programming. And so, yeah, I was a world away from what I am now. And I went out just to have a break because I didn't know what the next chapter and the next step in my career should be. I was teaching everyone else how to run businesses and how to turn their passion into something that can make money and work for themselves rather than lining someone else's pocket. And I was not doing that for myself. So went on an expedition, paddleboarded 1,000 miles, still didn't know what I wanted to do, and then got on a bike and cycled solo west across the USA. And from there, things followed. But it was discovery by putting my feet in the wrong places and being burnt and being stung by things and really making every mistake under the sun, because I had no training and I didn't go on any training courses in those early days. I was just hell for leather trying to prove something to myself, of what I was physically and mentally capable of, proving something to the world, because I was in my early 20s and that's what you do at that age. And it was only as I got further into the career and realized that actually I could make a career out of this, that suddenly the travel, you go out into the world and you travel and you see things, and it changes you. You come back a very, very changed person. And suddenly my eyes opened to these Indigenous communities and the tribes that I was meeting and experiencing, and a very different way of life that people are having, a simpler one, but a very much more meaningful, deeper connection with the earth. And there lay my kind of tipping point where I said, okay, I'm going to invest now in some courses. And so, yeah, as I've had opportunity and as I've done different expeditions, the preparation for those have involved various different courses. For example, going out to the Essequibo with Laura and Pip, we went through remote medicines training, something I'd never done before. My expeditions solo were either highly risky because I hadn't had that training before, or they were with a crew, for example, with Red Bull, and there was a team, and they, their setup is that you have to have a paramedic with you. And so it was a different scenario. So as need arose and as my curiosity arose, that was just course after course after course that I went on. And yeah, it's one of those things where I think when you start out and you want to go and learn so much, you feel really daunted that where do I even start? Do I do climbing? Do I do navigation? Because the courses, they can cost a bit of money. And I think don't be daunted by that, because 5 years down the line you're going to look back and say, wow, I've accumulated quite a lot here, quite a lot. So gradually just chipping away at adding those, and also just hanging out with people, in that adventure community who do have those skill sets, and even if it's not going on a course, just picking up by first-hand experience with them. So that's a little bit of what I did too.
Yeah. So there are a couple of really good bits of advice. Take some courses, try and hang out with people who are kind of already where you want to go. What else would you say to somebody who's thinking like, I love the idea of a career adventurer or want to make money from my passion? What other advice would you give to them?
You know what? Too many people, when they start out, don't even start at all, because people have criticized it. They've had doubt about it. Friends, family, people, colleagues at work, whoever it may be, who say, come on now, really? You think you're going to make a career out of travel or this or that? Just, sod them all. Book that flight and go and do it. Don't give yourself a way out. I'm a big fan of, really paying heed to what it means to make a decision. If you go back in Latin, it is decision means to cut off. And so I think we don't take that seriously as a word. We don't really take seriously anymore, is that, made a decision to do something. Well, hang on, I don't really like it, or it's becoming awkward, or people are doubting it, and I'm doubting myself now. So I'm going to go to another thing, or I'm going to back out of that. And the toughest thing with a career in adventure or travel or exploration, whatever it may be, endurance sports, whatever you're interested in, is getting to the start line. It's not the expedition itself. It's not the physical or the mental challenge once you're on it. It's actually just getting to the start. And most people don't get there. So do something. And I think it was Alistair Humphreys who many years ago, I listened to him saying this, and I paid heed to that for myself, because I was in the early stages of my career. And he said, book the flight. Do something that you can't get out of, that you've committed so much money to going there, or you've committed so much time, or you've quit the job, or you've done whatever it may be, but go and do it. And you know what? If it doesn't work out for you and you don't end up enjoying it, that's fine. Pivot, go and do something else. There's absolutely no rules on at what age you should be doing what. You don't have to have the picket fence by 26 years old. You don't have to have the picket fence at all if you don't want it. And I think that, especially in the social media world now, I mean, it was bad back then, but now I think it's even worse, is this fear of judgment. It's just extraordinary. And I think that it's debilitating us. And I think that we don't quite understand to the degree and the depth of it. I think that we like to say we get it, and, oh, it's terrible and it's doing really bad things. But I think it's so hooked into us and dialed into us right now. And I think that if people can escape that and just find that courage to start whatever it is that you want to do. For me, I've ended up where I am now through starting my career and saying, oh, I'm not going back. I don't know what this looks like. I do see that there, in the early days, in those first expeditions, I realized that there was an audience of people that were really interested in hearing and seeing and reading about women on adventures. And that was my open door. And as I went through the career, as I said to you, it started out with me wanting to prove something to myself, then prove something to the world. And once I'd done that and I had nothing left to prove, I moved on, and it became more about trying to explore the meaningful depths of mind and body, not from a arrogance point of view, or a pride point of view, but out of curiosity about that, and really understanding the psychology of a human being. Then it became about exploration and finding parts and corners of the world that were untouched and unknown. And when I went to those corners of the world, because it was still about me on an expedition at that point in time, but then it evolved again, and it became about the story of other people. So those Indigenous communities and what they had to say, the wildlife and the conservation stories, and the threats that they were facing. And I realized that it was no longer about me. It was about what I could do to tell the story about others. So again, my career shifted and pivoted, and that looked nothing like what it did at the start of that. Thank goodness I had the courage to start, though, at every single chapter of this journey, because I could have just given up. They looked daunting, they looked challenging. It was stepping into the unknown. I could have sidetracked at any point in time, gone back to the safe place, a safe job, money coming in. And now it's just pivoted again. I've kind of veered into my home life being that of a regenerative farmer. And that's because I spent so much time with the likes of the San Bushmen in Namibia, who taught me that there is a far better relationship to be had with our food and our environment. And that if we are going to be here in 100 and 200 years, and I've got a little girl now, so I do care about that, then I can't just go and tell the story of the San Bushmen. I need to come home and have a tangible impact. And some people I might make a great documentary, and that's fantastic, and that can shift a lot of people. But for a lot of people, it's also just going to be another story. And they have great will, and they think, oh, I might change a few things, and not much does change. And I can't guarantee that just my storytelling alone will have the impact that I really want it to long term. And so I wanted to put my money where my mouth was and say, okay, what can I do physically myself with my own hands that can change something? And doing regenerative agriculture was a way to change a broken food chain and a broken connection with nature, and where that food comes from and how that food is grown, so that it improves the quality of biodiversity, of soil health, of the future, of the health of our planet, at the same time as improving the health of a human being, and fixing that food chain and that connection. And so, yeah, it's just at every single stage, my advice would be, just throw yourself into it. If it changes, expect that it might change. It doesn't matter. Just start. You never know where you're going to end up.
Yeah, great advice. And I'm really glad that you brought up regenerative agriculture, because I'm kind of obsessed with it right now, and I'm really looking to get into it as well. So it's really cool.
Good.
I didn't
Even
know
better.
that you were into this before I started researching for the show. So this is awesome. So loads of stuff that I want to ask you about, but I think you did a really good job of illuminating kind of what regenerative agriculture is and how it's different to traditional farming, with kind of regenerating soil and biodiversity and creating great quality food and carbon. And so I think we're kind of have a good level set there, because regenerative agriculture is quite a niche term. So a lot of people are familiar with sustainable farming, but regenerative agriculture is a little bit more niche. But I think it's awesome that you've gone into it. So how did you decide kind of what enterprises to run? Because there's lots of different elements of regenerative agriculture. So some people can be that they can have kind of microgreens, market gardens, or they might be doing kind of forestry. Or how did you? There's lots of different routes to enact regenerative agriculture. So how did you decide what you were going to do?
I'm going to backtrack before I go into that, and just on the note of regenerative agriculture, just for those who are new to it to understand it. From my perspective, what I understood was organic is fantastic. There's some great efforts around the world, but they don't go far enough. And I think a lot of what we're facing at the moment with farming, with food production in general, is people going into the space of how can we be sustainable. And for me, that just didn't make sense at all, because why would we sustain the level that we're at, or even close to the level that we're at? That's impossible. We can't just be sustainable. We can't just look at the next 10 or 20 years and say, well, did we do a good job for that? That's that's ridiculous. We need to be like the old farmers of the old days. We need to look at regeneration, not just sustainability, because we are so far gone. And the old farmers 100, 200 years ago, they were very much of this mindset of what I do now needs to benefit my farm in 100 years' time, because those farms used to get passed down generation to generation to generation. So that value was viewed in a completely different light of what they were creating. It wasn't just, oh, I might have this farm for 5 or 10 years and then move to another one. So don't really care what I do with it. If I degrade the soil by doing monocropping and tilling the land and, throwing all these chemicals into it, doesn't matter. I'll just move on to the next one. And even organic to a certain extent. I mean, that's halfway there. It's incredible. You're eliminating those terrible chemicals from the soil, but you're still tilling it, and you're not focusing necessarily as much on the biodiversity, that entire picture of the entire farm, and how nature feeds into that, every single part of nature. And so for me, that journey was really important. Is to understand that the future in regenerative agriculture is a view of 100 to 200 years in the future, and how will our planet benefit from what I'm doing right now. But yeah, in terms of going into the revenue streams and how we're making our money on our farm practically right now, starting slowly is what we realized after year one. You can't go into everything all at once, but if you look at any farming, anyone coming into it, or any old farmer who's been doing it generation after generation, is going to say to you, you need to diversify. That is absolutely the way forward. It's a very, very, very tough job to have as a farmer if you're doing one thing, because you have weather conditions that are becoming more extreme. You're having pest control that you're having to manage because the environment is now out of balance. Nature is out of balance, and weird things are happening. Disease, and that one thing goes wrong, and that's your entire year's worth of crop gone. And that's everything you rely on. And so for me, I'm really glad coming into farming and regenerative farming as a first generation farmer, because I've come with it from a completely blank canvas. And the amount of research that I had to do to even feel like I could begin to step into this industry was immense. And that allowed me to start off with understanding that there's no other way to do it but to be very, very diverse in your revenue streams to be successful. So if one thing fails, if that crop is wiped out by hail that year, that's fine, because I've still got the chickens, and I've still got the microgreens, and I've still got XYZ, all these other things. So that's how we're doing it. What we're doing right now for year one was just focusing on the market garden. So for a lot of people who don't understand what a market garden is, it's kind of like a condensed space that you grow in. We're doing raised beds within that, and we're doing intercropping, vertical cropping. So per square foot, the amount of yield that you give is phenomenal. Whereas monocropping is these big open fields, and you see these, widely spaced apart rows of whatever, turnips or beets or whatever it may be. That requires an extraordinary amount of space. We can do this on an acre and a half if we want. And so we're starting out with that this year, understanding it, getting to know the ins and outs of our location and our environment. And then next year, well, actually right now, I'm about to go into microgreens. So sourcing the market for that, that is something that is a very safe bet. It's when you look at all the farming enterprises that you can do, everything from growing trees to mushrooms to the big crops to laying hens, meat, beef, whatever it may be. Microgreens is up there with mushrooms as one of the most lucrative. The setup cost of that is very, very, very small. It's a very controlled environment because it's indoors. You can do, if you live in London in the city, you can have a little garage space or a room in your house. It doesn't, like a little spare room, and you can grow an extraordinary amount in a tiny, tiny, tiny space with very little setup cost. So that's something that we're definitely going to be setting up now. And
it takes a lot less time compared with some others. So kind of like a market garden, I think could take like 3 times as long. I have seen, so I kind of
Oh, it's all
fanboy.
consuming.
Yeah. I fanboy Richard Perkins, who has an amazing farm in
Yep, so did
Sweden.
we.
In Sweden, yeah, he has a brilliant
Hmm.
book called "Making Small Farms Work," and he's kind of
Yeah.
spearheaded the regenerative agriculture movement here in Europe. And he has this incredible PDF that's free, and it compares all of the different enterprises that you can look at and shows you how many hours per year on average you'd need, what the setup cost is, and what you can expect to earn. So, kind of revenue and costs and net profit. So, if anybody is interested in this, I highly recommend taking a look at that. And it will show you how much land you need. For example, if you want grass fed cows, you need loads of land. If you want microgreens, then as Ness was saying, you can do it in like a tiny little area. And then you can think about how much time you need for each of these and how much you can put in as well. So that's a really good resource if people are interested in learning a bit more.
And check out his YouTube channel if you're new to this and you're thinking, well, actually, I could do with a lifestyle change, and this is sounding pretty good, you know. And if you don't need that much farmland, you know, don't have to be a multi-millionaire and go buy 500 hectares of land. You can start in London where you are right now with the microgreens. But yeah, have a look at his YouTube channel. There's quite a few other fantastic growers out there. Joel Salatin is another one to have a look at. If people want to start looking into regenerative agriculture and the environmental side of it and the impact. Also, Zach Bush, if you want to look into the health side. I don't know if you've come across him, but he's absolutely phenomenal. When you talk about the gut microbiome and then expand that into the microbiome of the earth, it's just mind-blowing. He's one of those individuals that makes you feel very, very, very stupid. He's just, his knowledge base and the way that he articulates things, the way he expresses and communicates is phenomenal. So check him out if you haven't. But yeah, next year we're going to expand, and as I said, microgreens now. Then we're going to go into laying hens. We're also going to go into table birds. And for next year, that'll be it. The other thing that we're going to be focusing on next year is going fully self-sufficient. So we do not want to be buying any food from the shops. And that means we're going to be giving up on quite a few of our little treats and bits and pieces. But we're also going to be having the benefit of we're going to be eating seasonally. Everything is organic. It's out of our backyard over here. We've got a small flock of sheep. We're going to have a couple of cows. We're going to have a dairy cow. We're going to have a couple of beef cows. This also helps us manage holistically all of our land. So one of the things about, I think if people want to have a look up the Savory Institute and Alan Savory, some very interesting information out there amongst the Rodale Institute as well, incredible resource. But when you start looking at how farms used to be managed and how completely disconnected they are now from what they used to be, it's just mind-blowing. And what we're doing is holistically managing our land. So we will run our cows first across, and we'll manage them in tight herds, of spaces where we put out electric fencing on a certain square meterage of our farm, and every single day we'll move them to a new patch of that, and it's mimicking how nature works. So when you look at here's a big example of my home continent, Africa, and you look at the Great Migrations. Those used to be phenomenal herds that used to stick together in the millions. And they used to move across the continent at the same time all together. So they would graze out a piece of land, a grassland, and the next day move on to the next part of that grassland, and the next, through country and country and country. And they would only come back in a year's time, which allowed that grass to regenerate, or allowed that soil to take in the urine and the poop from these animals, and that beautiful fertilization. And there's a certain resting period and certain cycle where something is, for a very short period of time, intensely grazed and then moves on and allows beautiful recovery out of that. And the results are phenomenal. So we'll run our cows first, followed by our sheep, because they'll graze a different kind of level of the grass. They'll graze different plant species as well. So they'll follow on, they'll poop on that ground, urinate, and then a few days later, once all that poop is on the ground and the flies have come there and the maggots are starting to grow out of that, then we move our chickens in. And the chickens absolutely adore it, because that's their ideal food source is insects and worms and natural pieces and nuggets of protein, and they scarify the ground, and everything just is, in the perfect synchronicity that it should be, and the perfect balance. And so we want our farm animals to create a microbiome and a diversity out of how they're managing the land that mimics exactly how it would be in nature. So I suppose, as it were, our cows would be seen as our keystone species of the farm. And so the health of the farm is going to be tenfold that of one that doesn't have that function on it. So yeah, it's very controversial when you start stepping into this world of how should we manage our animals, and should we be eating meat? I think, to be honest with you, the question is and it goes for all food. So whether it's your horticultural side and your vegetables and your fruits, or whether it's the animals, don't ask which should we be having, but rather how are each of them grown or being managed. That is the question. And so, yeah, we are looking at self-sufficiency next year. So we're going to have everything that we eat, including our meat, is from our backyard. If we do want anything else, we'll go hunting and foraging. Even our salt we plan to get from the sea, and making our own sea salt. So yeah, we're going on this incredible journey to try and simplify how we live, and in doing so, hopefully, benefit the planet, benefit our small, tiny farming environment around here, and at the same time, really have a dramatic increase in our own personal health and now our lifestyle and our well-being.
Well, it's amazing, really inspiring. I would love to ask you questions for hours and hours about this. So we'll have to do another podcast one day, but I know that you've got to go soon. So we'll save that for another day.
No problem. Yes, regenerative agriculture. I think we can dive down a good long tunnel there with that.
Go down the rabbit hole. I get really quickly. What are the? I mean, not idealizing it. What are the downsides, like at the kind of cliff notes? Have you experienced any yet?
Certainly, yeah. It's in our experience and knowledge that we have, and that only comes with time. So, for example, in this very first year of having the market garden, one downside is if you go into farming, you're at the mercy of the elements. There's no getting away from that. So, hailstorm comes in and wipes out all of my new little seedlings that have just been transplanted out. We had in April last year, we had snow coming in here, and it just, as soon as you'd planted out for the first seedlings, direct sown, and they were just wiped out. So yeah, there's downsides of that. But for us, it was more, when it comes to disease control and things like that, it's our understanding of how a healthy regenerative farm environment should work. There's a balance of all the species, of the plants, of the animals, of everything. And we just have so much to learn. And, for example, if you get taken down by aphids, well, if you put thistles and grow them next to your tomatoes, the aphids prefer the thistle. And so they'll go to that. And so there's this beautiful dance and dynamic that you need to understand, and also in terms of the soil health beneath the ground and the life beneath the ground, and how that can get affected by everything. I think that for me, it's not really a downside. You say, what's the the cons, the downsides of the cliff, that you're staring across. It's just a lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
But that is just, it fills me with so much excitement for the future, because once I've got 10 years down the line and I feel like I really got a grip on this, I think that's a really phenomenal place to be.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I can't wait to talk to you a lot more about it another time. But for now, I'll let you go, Ness. So thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to chat. Thank you for taking the time.
Likewise. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And listeners and watchers, thanks for tuning in as always. So until next time, have a good one. See you.